The latest CNN New Hampshire primary polls give insight into who likes Nikki Haley. Who are these people who like Nikki Haley? That is what everybody wants to know. So let's go ahead and look through this poll. This is actually interesting, and it gives us some insight into the voter that is interested in Nikki Haley, also what these Republican voters want. So this is the CNN 2024 New Hampshire primary poll. They've got here first choice GOP 2024 presidential candidate, likely GOP primary voters. This was from January 19th of 2024. This is probably why Ron DeSantis dropped out. Because though him and Nikki Haley pretty much came neck and neck when it came to Iowa, Ron DeSantis just slightly ousting Nikki Haley by 1 or 2 percentage points, he's getting stomped in New Hampshire against Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is at 39% for the GOP, the GOP primary voters for New Hampshire, the ones that have registered to vote. 39% prefer Nikki Haley, 50% prefer Donald Trump. So he's still beating her by double digits. But Ron DeSantis there in a dismal 6%. This is why Ron DeSantis backed out. He didn't want to get harmed, like he didn't want to be harmed like that. It's better to bow out early than to have to look really ridiculous and be way last, third in this by a lot and be trampled by somebody like Nikki Haley. And then you have to wear that for the rest of your political career. They'll point, well, in New Hampshire, you only got 6% of the voters. He came in a distant third. So that's probably why he bowed out. Nikki Haley, 39% of these voters. Let's go on to this next part of the poll here. First choice GOP 2024 presidential candidate, likely GOP primary voters by party registration, January 19th of 2024. Look at this, registered Republicans. Now this is where things shift. 67% like Donald Trump, 23% like Nikki Haley, and 8% like Ron DeSantis. That is quite a difference between the previous poll when it kind of combines everybody who's going to be voting in the New Hampshire primary. When you look at the registered undeclared, this is where Nikki Haley grabs people. She's grabbing these independent voters. Trump gets 30%, Nikki Haley gets 58%, and Ron DeSantis goes down to 4%. So it's these undeclared voters, it's these independents who apparently just must love war because that's the only thing Nikki Haley talks about. War, war, and more war. I want a Department of Offense. So they're really supporting Nikki Haley. I think it's more of a vote against Trump, to be honest. I don't think they're even paying attention to what Nikki Haley stands for. I think if they really sat and thought about it, would you rather have 4 more years of Donald Trump where, yeah, maybe he says ridiculous things that drive you crazy, or would you rather have World War III? I don't know, take your pick, right? Take your pick. But apparently a lot of voters choose World War III. Scary. Now look at this part of the poll. This is where it gets interesting. The people who are supporting also Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley and how they lean politically. So a lot of those undecided, undeclared voters. Now I'm an independent voter myself in the state of California, but I will admit I lean left. I'm very libertarian, but I tend to, in my voting habits, lean more to the left. Now, but I could vote any way I want because I'm an independent. The people in New Hampshire have the same, right? They can vote in the Republican primary if they so choose because they're unregistered or they're independent, or they could choose to vote in the Democratic primary. There's really no Democratic primary. So if you're an independent voter in the state of New Hampshire, even if you lean radically left, but you've just never registered for the Democratic Party because maybe you don't really like the Democratic Party, you don't want to be affiliated with the Democratic Party, or whatever it might be, you can then go and vote in the Republican primary. That's the problem with the New Hampshire primary. Or it's not really a problem, I think, maybe in general, but it's certainly causing an interesting outcome this time around. So look at the way these voters lean in this part of the poll. Liberal, progressive, socialist, 4% of them said that they would vote for Donald Trump, even with that political leaning. But look at Nikki Haley, the liberal, progressive, socialist wing. 91% of them are voting for Nikki Haley. That's who's that's how they identify themselves. Or moderate, 71% Nikki Haley, 22% Donald Trump. Conservatives, now people who consider themselves conservative or even libertarian, Conservatives, 17% like Nikki Haley. And yeah, only 21% of libertarians like Nikki Haley versus 61% Donald Trump, because libertarians tend to be pro free speech. They tend to be against war. And Nikki Haley is against free speech and she's pro war. So, what does that tell you when you've got liberal progressive socialist voters? 91% of her voters saying that that's how they lean, or moderate, and they're going for the anti-free speech, pro-war candidate. It really showcases the state of where liberal progressive socialist politics are, that they are sadly in the exact spot that conservatives have constantly pointed out. Those socialist voters are going to take our freedoms away, and they're going to, they're all about taking our freedoms, and then this kind of proves it, sadly. Let's go on to another part of this poll. This is the first choice. This is where the trajectory. So this is from September of 2023 all the way to January 19th of 2024. What the primary voters for New Hampshire, who they were likely to vote for. What's interesting is for Donald Trump, he started off at 39% back in September. That's probably when a lot of the court cases were coming out, saying, oh, this guy's a crook. They probably weren't sure if he'd even be able to run. 42% in November, so he climbed a bit, but then he dropped back down to 39% at the beginning of the month. But now he's at 50%. So he's kind of gone up and down. People are kind of mercurial about Donald Trump, just as mercurial as he is as a person. But here's Nikki Haley. Look at her trajectory. This is what she's looking at. This is what she's banking on. This is why she's still in the race. She started at 12% in September, 20% in November, 32% in January, now 39% by January 19th. So she's just on that upward trajectory. When you look at those yellow bars, they just go straight, at an incline up. Whereas Donald Trump, up and down, up and down. So Nikki Haley's looking at that, and she's thinking at the next primary, the next primary, the next primary, she's just going to keep going up and up and up until she starts defeating Donald Trump. She's banking on the Joe Biden effect. If you remember when Joe Biden ran in the primary in 2020, he lost the first 2 or 3, or the first 2 for sure, Iowa and New Hampshire, before he finally got to South Carolina and won. So that's what she's banking on. And then Joe Biden ended up sweeping and getting the nomination. That is why Nikki Haley is still in the race. It comes to that trajectory. She's looking at that and thinking she's going to get the nomination. And also, anything goes when it comes to Donald Trump. If they try to take him out in a variety of ways, Nikki Haley would be standing there ready to take that nomination. Here is another aspect to the poll. This is what they care about. This is really important to look at. What do people care about? What do these GOP primary voters care about? Border immigration is their most important. The dark red is when they say this is my most important issue. For the orange, it's my second most important issue, and yellow is third most important issue. But when you combine them, people really care about the border and immigration. Then most of them actually care about protecting democracy or the Constitution. You see 22% say that that's their most important issue. But combined, that ends up being in third. Cost of living is number 2 for these GOP primary voters. Then jobs and economy. Then taxes, budget, or debt. Then winning the 2024 presidential general election. Then foreign policy at 21%. This kind of makes me sad, that 21%. Look, we can't have nice things because we spend all of our money on the military. We're constantly engaged in hostilities around the world. We're bombing everywhere. We're losing our prominence on the world stage. We're losing the goodwill that we've had, people thinking America as heroes. People are not thinking of the United States like that anymore, and it should really bother all of us. And it should be really important because, again, we can't solve a lot of these issues. If you're worried about the border and you're worried about terrorists coming through wanting to harm Americans, then if we stop acting like terrorists around the world, people will stop wanting to come here to terrorize us, right? If we're just like a neutral, happy country, people won't want to come here and meddle with us as much. Of course, crazy people are crazy people, and crazy terrorists are crazy terrorists no matter what. I don't think you're ever going to be able to stop them completely, but you can certainly lessen the likely that someone's going to target you if you're not targeting them first, kind of a thing. So it's interesting what voters are caring about quite a bit. Let's go to this last one here. This is the status of American democracy, likely GOP primary voters. American democracy is under attack. Most of the voters are saying, yeah, 72% are saying that American democracy is under attack. Look, they're watching Donald Trump being carted off to court over and over and over again, twice attempts at impeachment, trying to get him for an insurrection, and even trying to remove him from the ballot, saying that he started an insurrection, even though he's never been charged, let alone actually convicted of that crime. So 72% are saying that they think it's under attack. Another 21% say they think it's being tested, but it's not quite under attack. So that's pretty much everybody thinking that there's a serious problem with American democracy. And what's crazy about it is you've got a lot of Democrats saying the same thing, right? If you probably did this poll for Democrats, it'd probably be the same. It's just the perception is interesting. What Democrat voters would believe is an attack on democracy versus what Republican voters believe is an attack on democracy. It'd be kind of an interesting thought experiment to find out what exactly do you think is the problem? Spell it out. I don't know if Democratic voters can actually really verbalize why they think democracy is under attack. What they've said is Trump, he's a fascist. But then you say, how? And there's really not an answer to that. It's a lot easier for Republican voters at this point to answer that question. Well, they tried to impeach Donald Trump twice. They've been carting him off to court. They tried to remove him from the ballot. Democrats are saying they're not even having a primary. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that could be verbalized coming from the GOP side. But I want to say that with a word of caution, because I do think that the pendulum swings, and it swings often when it comes and it just swings based on who benefits from it. So right now, I do think that Republicans have tended to be towards free speech and democracy and upholding democracy. But especially when you look at the election, even in 2016, Republicans were not happy about Donald Trump winning, but they allowed that to happen. When you look at what happened with the Democrats on Hillary Clinton, they wouldn't even allow Bernie Sanders to get through. They were like, no, it's her turn. We've already decided. There's no democracy there. So I think Republicans have showcased themselves to be more lately pro-free speech, pro-democracy, but that can change at any time. If it's no longer useful to them, if it's no longer beneficial to them, it will change. We have to have a principled reason and a principled guiding light for maintaining free speech in this country and maintaining democracy, even when it's speech we do not like, even when the democracy doesn't go the way we want. We have to have that guiding light, that North Star that tells us, that reiterates this, no matter what party is in power, no matter who's gaining the free speech or whatever it is. And unfortunately, right now, I think it's just weaponized and politicized more than it is actually a guiding light for belief. So Nikki Haley, she gets owned she does a town hall in New Hampshire last week, getting ready for this big primary that's happening tomorrow night. During this town hall, she has to answer a question about free speech. So I want you to watch this.
Hi, Governor Haley. As a college student and a young American, a key priority of mine in this election is the free expression of ideas and bridging the political divide in this country. You've campaigned on being a president for all Americans. Now, it seems that in the past 2 decades, as college campuses have become increasingly left-leaning, Republicans were the voice of centering the dialogue and inviting disagreement. I'm concerned, however, by the rhetoric that's come from Republicans like yourself since October 7th, that we should vet and shut down ideas that we deem harmful. You floated the idea of social media companies verifying all users by name, and one of your opponents, Governor DeSantis, has sanctioned pro-Palestine student groups on public university campuses in the state of Florida. So my question is, will you commit to being principled on free speech, meaning supporting even that speech that you disagree with? And if yes, what's your plan to do that?
Okay, so CNN won't let us see the answer. We actually searched high and low for the rest of that video and hope to get like the entire CNN clip or even just the entire CNN town hall, and it's nowhere to be found. But we found the transcript. It's like they don't want the answer to that question. And so Nikki Haley, this is what she said in her transcript. She says, "So I will always fight for freedom of speech. What I was referring to when it comes to our tech companies, there is a responsibility that our social media companies have. What I think they should do is they should show us their algorithms. They should be completely transparent so that you know why they push what they push, why you see what they want you to see, all of that. That's a business transparency situation." So she starts off, she ignores the whole Palestine free speech on college question, and she just goes straight to she's been calling in the past for people to have to show themselves on social media. So she says, when it comes to disclosing who you are, I'm not saying that Americans have to disclose their name. What I'm saying is you have millions of foreign bots where there are no people behind them. When I was in the United Nations, Russia, China, and Iran knew and said it was the cheapest form of warfare. There are millions of bots that are spreading disinformation, that are sowing division in our country, and they're doing this to spread harmful things to our younger teenagers. And what I'm saying is those social media companies have to do something with the foreign bots. Okay, so, these foreign bots are spreading misinformation. I got news for you, Nikki Haley, but you spread misinformation. Mainstream media spreads misinformation. There's misinformation all around us. It's not just coming from Russia, China, and Iran bots. She says, "I will always fight for Americans' freedom of speech, but I'm not going to fight for Russians and Iranians and Chinese freedom of speech." And that's what's happening. That's the part we have to take care of. That's an interesting thought. So only free speech for Americans, not free speech as a principle. I don't agree with her. I believe in free speech for everybody. Yes, as an American, I have it protected in the Constitution, but it's a principle, it's a value, a moral principle of believing that all people should have freedom of speech. And she says, no, not for Russians, Chinese, and Iranians, just for Americans. She says, now as a mom, do I wish everybody would put their name next to their comment? I think it would be great. I think it would be more civil. I think we would have less, of the child pornography. I think we'd have less of other things, but I'm not going to say government should make anybody do anything. What I do think is the national security risk when tech companies know that there are millions of foreign bots and they're doing absolutely nothing about it. So if you go, it's another reason why I think we have to ban TikTok, she says. India banned TikTok because it was causing so much social disruption. Nepal did the same thing. So dictator Nikki wants to ban TikTok. She says, why are we continuing to have social media platform that is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and that we know is doing harmful things to us, like putting Osama bin Laden's letter up there and all those things? That's what I don't want. So she doesn't want you to read the letter from Osama bin Laden. She doesn't want you to have information about what our enemies say about us, about why attacks happen to us. She doesn't want you to have that information. Only the narrative she approves is what she's saying. She doesn't want you to have TikTok where you might get an alternative viewpoint. She wants you to have her viewpoint. So she wants to ban these. She wants social media companies that can be controlled by American legislation. She says, I want you to have as much freedom of speech as possible. I do not want those that hate us to be able to have freedom of speech and cause division in our country. I don't agree with Nikki Haley. I think that freedom of speech is a principle that you either agree with morally and ethically on every level. You don't just agree with it for one group of people. That's the problem. When you say, oh, no, I only like it for one group of people, but not for those others. That's what we're trying to fight. That's the battle. And yet she's saying, no, I only want it for some people and not for others. You don't have a constitutional right to free speech if you are Chinese or if you're German, for that matter. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't think they should have that. We believe that they should have that. And we as a free country believe that everybody should have free speech. You should be able to have all the information and then make up your own mind. Make up your own mind about, once you get the information, if you read Osama bin Laden's letter and you think that it's got valid points, you should be allowed to have those opinions because you have the information. If you read Osama bin Laden's letter and you think, it's a bunch of junk and I don't want to hear any of this crap, then don't read it again and you don't have to believe any of it. It's that simple. But to tell somebody else, well, I don't want you to be able to read it because I don't trust you. I don't trust what you're going to believe after you read that letter. You might actually think that the United States is an evil empire. You might actually think that the United States engages in endless war for profit. That's what you might end up thinking. You might actually think that the United States needs to get out of the Middle East and allow them to have their own sovereignty. How dare you think something like that? I do want to play this kind of montage that came out. It's kind of blurry, but you get the idea. It's a montage of Nikki Haley basically just saying one thing and then going back and saying that she never said that because she's a big liar. And that's basically what she said to this student when the student said, well, you said you want big tech to censor Americans by making people identify themselves online. And she basically said, I never said that. Watch this. Watch the other times she said, I never said that.
Governor DeSantis is hitting you for claiming the retirement age is, quote, way, way too low.
I have never once said that.
But what we do know is 65 is way too low, and we need to increase that. We need to do it according to life expectancy.
I never once said Hillary Clinton was an inspiration.
I often say that the reason I got into politics was because of Hillary Clinton.
I never said government should go and require anyone's name.
false.
A huge issue that I'll deal with as soon as I get there is social media. They need to verify every single person on their outlet, and I want it by name.
What I have always said is boys go into a boys' bathroom, girls go into a girls' bathroom. But hold on one second. When I was governor, they wanted to bring in a bathroom bill, a transgender bathroom bill, and I strong-armed and said, we are not going to have that in South Carolina.